You ready to get started?
Yes,
Yes? All right, let's go.
I'm ready.
All right. So, welcome everybody to this workshop. I'm so excited to be here because I feel like with these type of topics, it sounds big to say we're healing generational curses, and I feel like if we only knew, which I'm going to show at the end, and I hope we really feel this for everybody that's here today, like really, really feel this training, soak it in, like, and make it something that you put at the forefront of your thought, especially talking about forgiveness, because when we heal, we are releasing the blockages and the things that are holding us back from fullest potential. And by bringing Naisha onto this workshop, not only are you going to learn about her story and how she basically turned lessons into blessings, and really just her position now in the Black and brown community as a pillar of what family looks like, as a pillar of strength. And then recently, this forgiveness thing, ever since me and her talked about it, I've been glued to her with this because it changed my life and it helped me to see areas that I was struggling in. So once you see the 8 steps to forgiveness, you're going to be able to identify specific thought processes that you might be having trouble with. So then you could say, all right, I need to work on that concept. I need to work on understanding empathy and what does it look like? Or, how do I create boundaries between myself and that person, right? So you're giving yourself, I hope you guys have notebooks or writing it. You could put it in your phone, your notes, because you definitely want to take away some things so that you understand where am I being blocked. Shout out to Gary Williams, who presented this workshop and came to me with this topic. And before this, we talked about trauma care specifically. So we're going to kind of gloss over trauma care, but really take a little bit more focus on the 8 steps to forgiveness and how we can implement these things into our life so that we can really heal and create a legacy through our actions of wholeness. Once we feel we become whole, it's just so powerful. So you guys, welcome to this webinar. Welcome, Naisha. Thank you so much for saying yes. The way that this just worked out, it was so, this got rescheduled and it was just perfect that you were able to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
So thank you. This is presented by Queens Recognized Queens, which is myself, as well as Serenity and Oasis Naisha. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. Today's presentation, we're going to talk about, who we are. So myself, as well as Naisha. And those who are joining, thank you so much. If you guys can just mute your audio upon joining, welcome, welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit about trauma care. What is it? How we use coping, and then the 8 steps to forgiveness. Because coping, when you look at the definition, it's all, you can also have positive coping mechanisms. You can also implement positive things. So that's what we want to focus on today. But obviously, we do have bad tendencies, not bad, but tendencies and coping mechanisms that may not be positive towards our long-term health. Then we're going to get into 8 steps forgiveness, and then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end to have Q&A. So make sure as we're going through, if you have a question, we'll see how much time we have. Obviously, we started a little bit late, so this will be ending at 1:30, but we know that you're going to have a lot to take away from this presentation. So I am Ebony Satora. I'm a holistic mindset coach. It's my passion and my purpose to help people find personal peace and power, so you can heal not only spiritually but emotionally while you're here on this earth via Queens Recognized Queens. And then we have Naisha, who is a author, mama, CEO, educator. And Naisha, I had to pull this picture because I was like, this is so relevant right now. I just love it. And the reason why I love just having her in this presentation is because the power that she brings is just so phenomenal. And I know you guys are going to feel it. So I wanted to share her with you. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Naisha. She is a wholesome growth strategist at Serenity and Oasis LLC, an accomplished author of her stories, her history told through the eyes of her true self. Naisha's 20 years of experience in women's health, clinical research, coaching, trauma release, and urban community risk mitigation shines through in her newest book, release titled Forgiveness, Overcome Emotional Trauma, Heal Relationships, and Find Inner Peace in Just 8 Simple Steps, which is so powerful. You can actually pre-order that now at NaishaWilliams.com. Naisha is a student at Harvard Business School and a graduate of Renaissance Life Therapies under Dr. Libby Siri from the well-respected Harley Street in central London. Her career success and excellence have been recognized across several fronts, leading her to be presented with the 28th Influencer. Those coming in, thank you so much. Award, the Women Leader of the Year Honorary Award, and a certificate of recognition by the City of Long Beach, an accolade from the House of Representatives under the Barack Obama administration, and many, many more. From experience, Naisha knows all too well what isolation feels like. When she found out that she was pregnant with her first child, a teenage Naisha sought solace and inspiration from her high school teachers. They served as a consistent and trustworthy support system she needed to not feel alone and vulnerable. With their help, she slowly started to have faith in her potential and pursued the life she always wanted for herself and her family. So just a round of applause for that really quickly. To just know who you're dealing with. And this is so important because in the last workshop we talked about you have to know your story. So when you know your story and you understand your story, you can see where blockages have been created that are prohibiting us from recognizing power. And power is forgiveness, because you know when you cannot talk about it, there's growth to be had. There's things that need to be worked through because you have to let that go so you can progress to that next thought and that next wave of thinking and forgiveness and empathy. And some of these words are so big, but it's possible. And these 8 steps are definitely a way for you to find your voice and to learn more about yourself. So what is trauma? So I kind of want you to also answer this, Naisha, as well, as a licensed therapist. How I think in terms of trauma is the experiences that have happened to us that, like I said earlier, create like anchors in our life where we just begin our beliefs. And there are things that happen to us that create negative beliefs about life because they shake us and they almost break us open in a way, first in our hearts and then in our minds, where we change the way we operate in the world, right? And that's why we don't reach or strive to reach our fullest potential. So that's how I see it. So I want you to tell us, like, what is trauma and what is trauma care when we think about applying methods to that.
Okay. Would you like to hear it now?
Yes. We're ready.
I think that when it comes to the idea of trauma, we create this whole big balloon or umbrella of something that's so deep, right? But trauma is pretty simple. It's when someone becomes deeply distressed or there's some sort of disturbing experience, and that's it. So trauma can look like anything when you feel like you are deeply distressed or in an uncompromising experience. So trauma to you may be, you losing your dog. Trauma to me may be me being, a victim of sexual assault. You may not have experienced anything else but that dog, but if you were deeply distressed in that moment, that becomes a traumatic experience to you. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, when they hear about people feeling or experiencing trauma in their life, they believe that it has to be like experiencing some sort of death or, being a rape victim or something so outlandish, but it's very simple. If you were in distress, if your body experienced some sort of distress or you have come into a depressive state based off of the experience, that is trauma. It's just that simple.
I love that, because I think the more we simplify life and hearing it in that way helps us to not make it so big.
Right.
So in your terms, I think getting into these next parts that we talked about. So for those of you that are just joining, so last we had 2 workshops. This was a 2-part series. And in the first part, we talked about what is trauma, which you just beautifully laid that out. And then we talked about how we use coping mechanisms to either avoid trauma that we've experienced that's created us to, the distress has created us to fail to see our potential and look through the lens of that trauma as if it like is something that we are supposed to identify with. So we got into a couple things, and I don't know if you guys can hear that sound, but I don't know why it's making that. One of the pillars before getting into these different holistic methods and talking about trauma care, because then we're going to get into forgiveness, is, you can't control the events that happen to you, but you can decide to not be reduced by them. Try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Do not complain. Make every effort to change things you do not like. If you cannot make a change the way you've been thinking, you might find a new solution. So I'm hoping that with this training, everybody watching it, you find a new solution, because I'm telling you, every time I talk to Naisha, I find a new solution. And that's the freedom that everybody deserves to feel, so that you can live in potential and stop living up to the thoughts you have in your mind from the experiences, right? Allowing our experiences to reduce us in some way. So we talked about coping last time. My interpretation of coping is like anything you're doing that's not healthy. And I'm sorry if the pictures are blurred out. But they might be shopping, it might be alcohol, it might be the mask that we wear, like pretending that we're okay. It might be being on social media too much, complaining. So to me, it's like anything that you're going to do in excessiveness that's not allowing you to grow, that's not helping you grow. The psychological interpretation was an adaptive, constructed coping strategy. So I think in general, we cope. And Naisha, I would love if you can chime in on this, as to why we cope, the different reasons why we cope, because I think the coping doesn't allow us to sometimes see the solution.
It doesn't. And I don't want anyone that's participating in this conference or this workshop today to feel like because they cope that is something negative or is something wrong. It's merely you finding your safe space within a time of you not feeling safe. Yeah. So coping, yes, it can be shopping, it can be finding food that you feel like, oh, okay, this makes me feel better. It can be sex, it can be anything that seemed like serenity in the midst of your chaos. So yes, we all have coping mechanisms. Yes, we all find a safe space, something that makes us feel good at the moment. I don't think to cope is a negative thing or something bad, but I do believe that when you find this coping mechanism or when you do it, you need to allow yourself time to figure out why you're doing it. It's the why, right? It's the why. Do I find safety in this? Why do I feel like this makes me feel better? What am I trying to not feel, which is why I chose this? But we all have it. And honestly, we all need it. But the work underneath that is what's important. And that's always asking why and for how long. Like my thing particularly was food. Like I just not so long ago, maybe 2 years ago, realized my connection to food. And it was really, really bad. I'm really conscious on what I consume. It's always something organic, but it was the excessiveness, the amount. Every time I got frustrated, every time I felt like I wasn't heard, every time I felt like I was overwhelmed, that's exactly what I did. But I grew up believing that food was encompassing of unity. So if I want to feel like I'm around people that support me, or if I want to feel like, this overwhelming feeling is going to end soon, that's what I would do. I would go to food. But yeah, coping isn't bad. It's just to figure out why you do it. And once you figure out why you do it, you can create a balance.
Absolutely. Yes, that was so powerful. Y'all see? And I'm happy you brought that up, because as I was even thinking about it too, I was thinking, it definitely is a great thing because it's a way of survival.
Right.
It's how you will survive, because the mind can break.
Right.
I think the mind can break if we allow it to get too far from our light, and I really hope this just continues to spark everybody's light that is on this, watching this now, as well as those who are going to watch it on the replay. So we talked about a couple things. So we talked about last time, we talked about the holistic applications that you can apply to your life that will help you to grow and to just see things from a different perspective. Journaling. I know, Naisha, you are a huge proponent of journaling as well. Meditation. To me, that's like non-negotiable. And some ways to do it and make it simple. Like Naisha said, like let's use the word simple, and just mindfulness. Therapy, coaching. I think especially in the Black community, I know for a fact I see now many layers. I see our relationship to the medical system. I see just a stigma in our community where it's like, I feel like it's just like, if it seems like that thing we don't do, like we don't do that. You know what I'm saying? Like we just keep it in the family and we work it out. We don't really work it out. It's not really getting worked out, the way that it should. So I definitely think that you have to consider therapy or coaching, whatever works for you, as a method to get through the experiences you've been through, the trauma, so you can really talk it out with someone powerful like my girl Naisha, to help you see it from a different perspective to where you can heal from it. Reparenting yourself, self-care, self-love, and then we got to forgiveness. And one of the things that I shared, and you just shared, getting to know your story, your why, to forgive, in which we're gonna when you see these 8 steps, simple steps to forgiveness, you're gonna see that, getting to know your parents' story, sometimes we have so much pride and ego that we don't want to apply that empathy. We don't want to see it from their shoes. We're just like, no, it doesn't matter. But it does. It really, really does.
Yeah, I'm probably just gonna stay with you guys for a minute.
If we can have you mute someone's mic is not muted. All right, I think we're good. So the 8 steps to forgiveness. Search for truth. Tap into empathy. Write it all down. So you guys should be writing this out because you need all 8 steps. You can even take a picture if you have your phone. Analyze your next steps. Communicate with the culprit. Set boundaries for yourself and them. Forgive yourself and forgive the culprit. The reason why I see forgiveness as such a holistic act is because it's taking the ability to mentally work your way through the thoughts that jumble together when you don't want to forgive somebody.
That's big. Yeah.
Because when you present this and we talk about search for truth, how does someone search for the truth in a situation? If we're looking at forgiveness, just step 1, and we're not going to get through each and every step. But as an example, like for step 1, what does that look like? What does that look like as someone who's trying to forgive the situation?
If you don't mind, Ebony, before we go into step 1, can I just kind of go through what I've experienced in life? So when they hear me speak about forgiveness, they understand that I'm really coming from a place of, okay. Yeah. So I think that for me, well, not I think, I know. For me, the effects of trauma was something that was in utero, right? My mom had me when she was 14 years old. So everything she endured before delivering me, I had already experienced. My mother and I grew up together. She was 14. My father was 18. So I was already in the mess. At the age of 12, I was raped and molested by a family member and his friend. Inside of a car is where it started, and everyone stood outside and watched it happen. This probably happened for about 2 hours. When someone did finally choose to come to my rescue, it continued inside the house, starting around 10 p.m. to 7 o'clock in the morning. That was the first time I ever seen the sunrise. I was 12 years old. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't share with anyone because I didn't feel like there was someone to share with. At the age of 16, I got pregnant myself. At 17, I had my daughter, and I was coming out of the supermarket, and I smelt the man that raped me. Now, I'm in a completely different state. I knew that they were not around me, but before my break, I smelt him. So I panicked. I looked around. I didn't see him, but he felt close to me. After that breakdown, they called my mother. I shared with my mother what happened. What I later found out was my mother could not come to my rescue because she too was a rape victim. So how can she show up for me if she has not yet showed up for herself? So after 17, delivering my daughter via C-section in a cold basement in a hospital alone, my mother, I found out not long after my mother was in the life, right? She was using drugs, and at the age of 23, I took her to court to get custody of my 2 little sisters. So here I am. I have a daughter at 17. At 23, I'm already in court trying to take custody of my 2 sisters from my mother. At the age of 24, I was pregnant with my first son, and due to preterm labor, I had to deliver him and be told that he was not going to survive, so I had to bury my son. Where the cemetery was, I had to drive past there every single day to go to work. So I was always reminded of my failure. When I say my failure, this was me at the time feeling like I couldn't forgive myself because it was my fault. I got married at 25, had my next child, later had my son. And while I was pregnant with my son, my husband was on a road. And while he was on a road, I later found out that there was infidelity involved. So I'm pregnant alone. My husband, I noticed that, there was infidelity. And so here I am going through all these different traumas of my father not being there, my mother and I having broken relationships, me being in a career that was not conducive to the life that I wanted to live. So I decided to write a book where journaling comes into place, writing it all down, which is step 3. It was time for me to start living in my truth, being honest with myself. I could have had all these cars, I had all these houses, but I was really unhealthy. I wasn't happy at all. So I made the decision for 2 weeks to meditate and to write down all of my truth. That then transpired to me self-publishing the Her Stories book, which I later found out that it helped a lot of people. There were similar women and men that was going through the same situations that I've gone through that I'm trying to now work over. I started to face these traumas of why my father left me, why my mother chose to do drugs, why did I have to take custody of my sisters when I'm only 23 years old with me already having a child. There were so many things that I went through and experienced where I could have said, forget it, I'm not forgiving anyone because you've done so many things to me or so many things happened to me, so why do I deserve it? So fast forward to now, here we are, we're speaking about these 8 steps to forgiveness. Why did I feel like it was important to even talk about forgiveness or walk down this road of forgiveness? Now, when it comes to forgiveness, what we need to understand is by forgiving someone, you are not gifting the culprit that you believe hurt you. You are forgiving because you are gifting yourself to eventually work off that bondage that the culprit or that relationship or that energy is you're tied to. So I wanted to forgive because I no longer wanted to be held captive from whatever that pain was that I felt in any of these relationships. So now here we are at 8 steps to forgiveness. I want to forgive everybody. Like, I want to do whatever I need to do so I do not feel the baggage. I want to feel so light and so true and be so authentically myself that whatever I need to do to show up for me so I can ultimately show up for other women around the world, I needed to do. And that's where forgiveness came into place. That was the only thing that I found that worked so well in my life and helped me rebuild not only my relationship with my father, not only the relationship with my mother. It allowed me to show up for my children. It allowed me to reach the level of success that I've never thought that I can possibly reach before, because I let go. And letting go is equating to forgiveness for me. So yeah, so now we're on search for truth. I think a lot of people don't like this particular step because it holds you accountable. The person that has to search for truth, we have to hold ourselves accountable. Were we affected or hurt because we had some sort of unrealistic expectation and it fell through? Or was it the culprit intentionally set out to bring you some sort of harm? So I think when it comes to all of these steps, number one is like, you want me to think about what role I played, or you want me to think that my expectations was unrealistic? It's so easy for us to deflect and point the finger to other people. But once we actually use some sort of introspection and focus on the role that we played in any particular situation, it'll be easier for us to work to step 2 to step 8. Do you want me to go into step 2 or? Yes? Okay. So.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. So yes, absolutely. And like you said, I think all of these steps, when you're working through it, that's why I said get your journal, because you need to write down all the steps first and foremost, and then put a little check next to the one that you know for a fact that if you had to work your mind through it, you would just be stuck. Because there's a lot of things that pride and ego, they just block it. You're just like, no, you know? And I am telling you that even for me working through this process and things that I have to forgive in my life, and y'all know if you listen to the podcast, we shared a lot of things. So, you know, working through them, I can see some of the ones where my ego and pride wants to just block everything down, and I have to work through and say, no, I really have to figure this out to the point to where I understand it. And like you said, it's so true. You feel lighter, you feel free, you feel so much comes into your life because now you're not weighted by those thoughts first. They're not the first thing that are coming to your mind. Now you can focus on other things, because it does tie us up. And I have an image for that we're going to show at the end, because it's so true. Energy is so real. So yes, let's lead us through empathy.
So step 2, after we've made the conscious decision to search for the truth and realizing the roles that we played, if we played a role in it at all, and chances are we have, we tap into empathy. Now, when it comes to empathy, now this is not sympathy, but stepping outside of ourselves and placing ourselves in someone else's shoes is being empathetic, right? So it was really difficult for me to say to myself, after my husband cheated on me, why in the world do I want to step inside his shoes to try to figure out the why? It was really difficult for me to say, if my mother abandoned me and did not show up as my mother, I didn't ask to be here. Why is it my job to step inside her shoes to figure out her why? So when we tap into empathy, it's us letting go for the moment of how we feel and all of the emotion attached to the situation, and say to ourselves, okay, if I was X, Y, and Z, would I have reacted the same way? Would I feel the same way if this happened? What possibly happened in their lives that played a part in why they're doing the things that they're doing? When it came to my mother, when I talked about her having me at 14 years old, how am I going to be upset or continuously being upset at my mother for not being the best version of herself for me, only because of the title of her being my mother? Before my mother was my mother, she was an individual. So me holding on to this title of mother with these expectations does not allow me to show up for my mother 100% and not see her as an individual. So when we tap into empathy, it's us saying, you know what? Let me see you for who you are without what I expect, without the list of the things that I expect you to do. So I think that when it comes to being empathetic, that is probably the biggest step of them all, because it allows us to move away from our emotions real quick and find closeness to theirs. So yeah, tap into empathy would be step number 2.
Yeah, I definitely was having a hard time with that one for sure. If you can just really quickly, and I just so I, towards the end, if anyone has a question, I just want to kind of address it now. I feel like I get all those points. I think that to me, I feel like people might even think it comes when you talk about a situation like your situation of the first time, like being molested by a family member.
Mm-hmm.
How would you then look at that situation? How can you look at that situation and tap into empathy?
And that's a really good question, because I talk about that in the book of forgiveness. Now, I'm not saying that if you're dealing with a culprit when it comes to molestation or rape, that was not intentional. But what I would say is when it comes to practicing empathy, you are taking the time out to research all that you can based off of that situation. So chances are when someone hurts you, they've been hurt themselves. So with understanding that whoever it was that came to me, that took my body when I felt the most vulnerable, was also a young boy, was also a young broken boy, was also someone who felt like they needed to take control over a situation because they didn't have control over their own lives. Mm-hmm. So no, I'm not saying you can't tap into empathy or it's not going to be really difficult, but everything has a why. Everything, when it comes to empathy, there's a reason to explain the possibilities on why certain things happen. So if you, like me, are a rape survivor or a molestation survivor, that is something that I had to work through. He wasn't doing it to me. He was doing it to someone. Do you understand what I'm saying? It wasn't an intentional target on me. It wasn't an intentional target on my body. It was someone who was broken, who didn't even understand that it was okay for her or him to break someone else. They didn't even understand that. So to answer your question, that would be it. To understand that broke people, break people, or broken people hurt people. There we go. So yeah, that is my feelings on empathy, and that is step 2. Once you search into the truth, now it's time for you to be empathetic. And then we go into step 3, which is write it all down. I know, Ebony, you talked about journaling. I am really big on journaling because I think it's Erykah Badu said it, right? You write it down, and that's when you see shit get real, because you actually have to face and deal with what it is that you're writing down, your truth. So once you search for the truth and realize the role that you played in it, then you tap into empathy, separating yourself temporarily from the emotion that you're going through, and put yourself in their shoes. Then it's time to write it all down. What happened? What transpired? How do you feel about it? What does empathy look like? What have you come up with? What do you want to do moving forward? How does this affect you? How does this show up in other aspects of your life that you want to make sure that you heal and change so you can be the wholesome person that you want to be? So journaling would be the write it all down.
And journaling is so powerful. It's just one of those things that I think, again, like you said, trauma is simple. It's different for everybody. I've heard stories from people that I've worked with that I was like, wow, I can see, how you would be, just having experiences with writing where we just don't want to write, or we leave school and we think we don't have to write again. And it's such a powerful form of healing, because we're taking what's up here. Everything is in our head, right? And that's the problem. So when you see it on paper, I think a lot of times you're like, whoa, because sometimes when you have to get it out and you write just letters, right? What Aaliyah talk about, how long was that letter? I don't know.
4
4 pages, right? And sometimes you can be writing, and I have people that are like, oh my God, when I wrote, like, I just wrote so much stuff, I couldn't stop. But you needed to get it out.
Right.
Because we are holding this energy in, and we are holding this, like, empathy, it takes courage. That's courage. That's tapping into a higher part of yourself that may not exist. Because it's challenging to have empathy for someone who has, as you feel, like you stated it so perfectly, it wasn't a direct target. Weren't a target.
Right.
You know, so it's just so important to understand that. And it definitely takes courage to embody that. But writing things down is so powerful. And I love that in your book, and in both of your books, you give that option to self-heal while you're reading, which I think is the most powerful thing authors have to do these days, because there's so much to unpack that when you read, you need to be able to stop and just say, okay, what did I learn?
Right.
How can I apply that to my life? You know, where am I? Like, empathy was big for me. That was one that I remember thinking of a situation. I'm like,
But that is you still hold on to the emotion, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely. But like you said in the very beginning, this is not a gift to you. If I forgive you, this is not a gift to you. And as we go through each of those steps, and you see the freedom, and you feel the freedom of having thought that thing and released it, and seeing how you can release it through communicating with the culprit, how you can release it by setting your boundaries, how you can release it by forgiving yourself, forgiving the culprit, then it's like, oh, I'm actually feeling that energetic change of letting go. Like you said I've been more successful than I even thought I could be, which I'm so proud of you.
It's real. Thank you. It's so real. Like, I thought, oh, okay, we got 3 cars in the driveway. We got a nice little house. You know, I'm making the most money I've ever made in my entire life in Beverly Hills. I think I'm doing it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, when I go get lunch, I'm pulling out a black car. Ebony, I thought that I was living the best life that I possibly could. But that was all, it was the game, the financial crap was there, the cars was there, the home was there, but my soul wasn't. Like, I was so unhappy. Like, when it was time for me to sit with myself, I could not do it. I had to stay busy. And that's what happens with us a lot of times. We stay so busy because we don't want to deal with us. We don't, no, I gotta face myself. No, let me go take on this extra load of whatever. Let me go ahead and go back to school. Let me go do this. Let me go do that, because I don't want to deal with me. And it was like, okay, do I want to continue this generational curse? Do I want to teach my girls and now my boy that this is how you're supposed to live life? Or do I want to show them that soul ties is not conducive? Or do I want to show them that trauma bonds is not where they should be? Or do I want to show them that, you know, living authentically yourself and making sure that you are forever trying to heal is how you reach or obtain this success? That's what I want to do. So whatever I need to do for myself, I'll make sure I do that. So then my grandchildren don't have to be who I was prior to me making the decision to heal.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel like it's so powerful. And I think, even to me, when people say honor your ancestors, it's like, yeah, you also honor them by healing, because there's this thing that they pass down. And it's so true, because when I look at my family, I see, you know, you see repeated scenarios. That's a problem. We have to stop it, and we have to say no more. Because I do believe there are, you know, as psychologists always say, you know, from birth to 7, 8, 9, that you kind of get imprinted. But I also think you can have situations as an adult, right? You could be in a certain type of car crash and you're like, I'm never going in cars again. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's different things that happen to us. However, it's like we have the choice to mentally find ways like this to look through a situation and understand ourselves, and understand that situations and experiences are simply here to guide us in a new way. But we have to take accountability, like that first part of our healing, and of saying, okay, how do I search for truth, and how do I look at this thing in a way that's going to allow me to release it, let it go. Like, let it go.
Right. It doesn't serve you. So you might as well let it go, because it has no purpose. Like we're holding on like we're doing a disservice to the person. Like, I'm gonna hold on to this because you made me so upset, so I want you to see how angry I am. You hurting yourself. You're not hurting them. They're no longer attached to it once it's done.
Not
So, right. So why do you feel like you need to hold on to it like it's something that's going to continuously hurt that person? They probably didn't even realize they were hurting you. So what's the point of you holding on to it? So yeah, like I guess we can go into step 4 when it's analyze your next steps. Excuse me. Now, the reason why step 4 is before step 5 is because we need to understand that we control our being, right? We set the tone for what happens in our life. So after we've wrote it down and we've looked at our truth, what is your next step for you? What makes you happy? Where do you see your life going from this point on? Once you realize, like, hey, this is everything that I got to deal with. I done wrote it down. I done cried. I done got upset at myself. I done got upset at the world. What are my next steps? And I need to analyze these steps before I communicate it with anyone. So when I go ahead and go to step 5 and I communicate with the culprit, I need to make sure that I am clear with less emotion and more logic. Because when we bring in more logic, we can articulate it better and we can set these boundaries, right? We want to make sure that we're so in tune with where we want to be and how we want to see life. So when it's time for us to communicate it, the culprit knows, like, okay, this is real. She's pretty clear on this, or he's pretty clear on this. This is what she no longer allows. He no longer allows. This is what we need to do from this step forward. If it fits right with me, then I respect it and I'll continue on. But if it doesn't, I need to go my way. But that's something that you need to make sure that you've already set a tone for yourself. What does this look like? Because if this person does not want to re-enter that door with you, what are you going to do after that? So you have to make sure that you've created, once you've written it down and analyzed your next steps, you created that exit strategy. You created how your boundaries look like. You've created what you want to do with the culprit. I'm sorry. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You want to make sure that all of that is done. And then when you communicate with the culprit, you'll be A1. You'll be clear-minded. You'll be able to do everything that you need to do. Give me 1 minute. I don't know how. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So the 4, 5, and 6, you'll notice if you purchase the forgiveness book, it breaks it down intensively. Like, how does that analyze your next steps look? How does communicating with the culprit look? And then when you get to the setting the boundaries, you can't. Okay, so when it happens to setting the boundaries, what does that look like? You set the tone. It doesn't matter if this particular person feels like this is unfair to me or it doesn't sit well with me. There has to be some sort of respect, and you have to make sure that you are the number one priority when setting the boundaries. So set boundaries for yourself and them, correct? Forgiving yourself. Oof. This is real. This is a real step, because a lot of times people do it the opposite way, right? They say, I forgive you, not even realizing that it's really not forgiveness. It's just avoidance. I just don't want to deal with it. I just don't want to hear it. I just don't want to be reminded of how it made me feel. So I'll say the word forgive as if it's really going to do the work because I said it. That's not the case. That's not forgiveness. So people would say to the culprit, whoever it is, I forgive you, but forget to forgive themselves first. Forgive yourself first. Forgive yourself. Forgiving yourself looks like you may not have known, but now you're learning how. You may not have known, but now you're protecting yourself and you're setting boundaries. It's not your fault. Don't stay in it. It's a learning lesson. It's a process. You don't have to beat down on yourself, but you have to make sure that you do the work talking to yourself first before you sit here and extend a hand to forgive someone else. Mm-hmm. So forgive yourself. Make sure you do that work. You've already communicated with the culprit. Look, this is what I want to, this is what should happen. This is how my boundaries look like. You know, I'll leave this for you. If you agree with it, then you agree with it. If you don't, you don't. But I'm doing the work to forgive myself at this moment. And until I forgive myself, until I show up for myself 100%, this is the only way that I can then show up for you. Because I've already realized the role that I've played. I've already stepped outside of myself and entered into your world. And I see why you do it. But then there's some things that I don't want to agree with anymore. I've already analyzed my next steps, and I know how I would show up in this relationship if it continues, or that I need to leave. I've already communicated this with you. I've set the boundaries. I told you what I would deal with, what I would no longer deal with, how I see things moving forward. I've forgiven myself. I've done the work. I've healed. So now it's time for me to go ahead and forgive you. But what people need to also understand is you can forgive someone while simultaneously walking away. So just because you've forgiven someone doesn't mean that you have to stay and continue to endure anything in their space or in your space. So you can do all of the work, all of the steps, while still moving on to the next chapter or no longer having them inside your life. And when we talk about communicating with the culprit, it does not have to be a face-to-face. You don't have to call someone. Writing a letter, this is what we do in therapy, right? It's like standalone. You put the chair in front of you, and then you have to speak to the person as if the person was actually there. You can write a letter. That can be your form of communication to the culprit. This is what happened. This is why I felt this way. This is how I felt you did this to me. This is how I want to continue to move on. Whatever that looks like, when you communicate, you find that sort of communication, and then you continue to do the next steps.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, because I think as you were speaking and I'm looking at the questions, you guys, thank you so much for your engagement. We see them, so we'll have a little bit of time to answer some questions at the end. But I'm thinking, you know, for certain situations, you have to use wisdom in knowing how to apply the step. Because for mental, you know, like we can't control how people will react to us wanting to initiate healing, because this is what it is, right? It's like an initiation of like, I also believe that when you forgive and someone feels that you've forgiven them, I also believe you open a door for them to forgive and to walk there and to be open to this process. I feel like that's how powerful it is. No different than a match, you know, being the one match that's lit that can light all the other matches, because energy is transferable. You know, we're able to allow people to see that. And like you were talking about with, you know, not searching for empathy, and you're like, you know, I want to show you how angry I am. Like when you think about it, it's so silly, and it's not us operating in our adult self. It's that's like childlike thinking, like, I'm mad at you, you know, and you're just going to see it forever. And it's like, but you got to let it go first. That's why I love that forgive yourself become forgiving them.
Right. And I think that when we walk into the world of forgiveness, right, it's really important that we don't dictate how someone receives what we're going to say to them. Like if I'm coming to you and it's time for me to communicate with you, and then I want to set my healthy boundaries, and then I want to express myself, we can't dictate how that person receives it. Why are you still trying to gain control? You understand what I'm saying? In any relationship, you are an individual, that person is an individual, and y'all come together. Still not losing your individuality. The moment you sit here and say, well, I would have done it this way, or I would have responded this way, or I'm expecting you to do this because when you did this to me, I felt something, you've already lost. You've already lost. You cannot control anyone or anything but yourself and what you do. The moment you sit here and step outside of yourself to try to gain control over someone else, it's not a win-win situation. Not only are you losing because you're trying to have control over something that doesn't serve you, you're also losing because you're trying to have control over someone else when you don't have domain over that.
I felt that. Recovering control freak here, right? You know, and that's in all honesty. And I think a lot of this, and some, I think, I don't know if someone said it earlier, but certain things are hard pills to swallow. And it's mature to go through these steps. It's mature to seek this because, like you, Naisha, we want to live our best lives. and I am a testimony of like just learning how to really, really let go and just watching doors open. And you just are like, wow, it's so crazy how much literal baggage in the physical realm we get tied down to when we are not forgiving of a thing. We are not forgiving of a situation. We are not forgiving of a trauma. And you mentioned something very powerful because I'm much like you, where I think being busy is a positive coping mechanism, right? Because you're not destroying yourself necessarily, depending on how long you let it go. Luckily, you woke up early. I woke up early. However, it is a way that we avoid sitting down with those uncomfortable feelings and little people that talk to us all day in our heads about the circumstances we've experienced and how we're not good enough and how we'll never be loved, how we can't be successful, we don't deserve love, or whatever it is. Like, we just develop all these stories. So I love there's so many points that you've made, and I think you've given us a lot of wisdom to work our way around. So you guys definitely get the book. You need the book. It's important for you to be able to sit and work through these and work through the way that you presented it, because as you can see, and I'm sure you guys can feel, this is very powerful and it's so necessary. And I feel like once you learn this, like, this is something to me that I'm like, you have to tell your friends, you know.
Please do.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, it's one of those things that is like, you keep in that space of a book. Like, there's books that I feel like you have to always access. There's books that you have to always, you got to go back to sometimes and read it again so that you can work through these emotions that we always have, and things are always going to happen to us. Yes. You dropped the name of the book in the chat.
Yes.
It's available at naishawilliams.com. So we're going to actually, yeah, so we have about 3 minutes. So we're going to open up Q&A in 3 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, if you could just pop that in the chat. But last but not least, obviously, forgiving the culprit, which I feel like is the, once you've worked through all the really other can be difficult ones, forgiving the culprit to me is the most freeing of them all, because you instead of associating with them and the event and all this other stuff, to me it's like you're gonna disassociate, which isn't always a great word, but it disassociate with it in a way that allows it to affect your spirit anymore, and your mind and your heart.
Yes, I agree. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. All right, you guys, listen. So if we're going to open up the floor to answer any questions that you guys might have, the book is Forgiveness, Emotional Trauma, Heal Relationships, and Find Inner Peace in just 8 simple steps. And that is available at naishawilliams.com. So I'll post that again. But yeah, you guys, please drop your questions. I see earlier, actually, I'll just scroll up as well. I don't know if Naisha, you could see some of the questions.
I'm going through it now. Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you, everyone. Like, it's really important to me, you know, our healing and our success and our overcomings is something that's really important. I don't do this to be talking about what table I'm going to sit at. This is not about, you know, how I'm going to be seen. It's about the work that needs to be done. It's about showing up for my sisters because they're deserving of it. So thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate everything that you said. Thank you. My story was amazing. Child, when I was going through it, I didn't think so.
And that's the important thing, you know, that's the important thing is that, you know, the way you talk about your story, and, you know, there were parts about your story that I didn't even know, that I recently learned. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love you so much, because it's just a testament to, you know, pain, suffering is optional.
Right.
And if we can find truth, and even if that truth is, what the hell did I learn? What have I what am I willing to take away from this in wisdom, and all of these things, but to me are wisdom, ways of working our mind through wisdom, and saying, what is that higher thought of this situation? Because the emotion is where the clouds are. That's the murky water where you're like, anger, right? That's an emotion. You're staying in murky water, not allowing yourself the capacity to release so you can feel this way. Hold on, let me get to this slide if it'll let me move on. Think about energy. Like literally, this is what happens. And last time when we did this, we did a chakra meditation. For those of you that have not done any of my chakra meditations, you could join those on Instagram TV. There's some there. But think about energy. Like when you have resentment, you're not forgiving, like you're literally hindering your energy. And if you think about how you feel when you think about things, you're not giving yourself that ability to have what you see on the right, which is the free flowing energy, right? Forgiveness is going to open up all knots so that your energy can flow, right? So that you can be in harmony with yourself. And like you said, like, this is something that's going to help us achieve inner peace, which to me is powerful. Like, talk about unbothered.
Like it's I'm so serious. Like I can laugh now. You understand what I'm saying? I can smile now. This is my story, but this is not all of me. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I can smile and I can talk about it is because it no longer defines me. I was only living in the mess. I was only living in the hurt. And I felt like that was the only thing that represented me. Almost as if it was a badge of honor, right? Oh, I went through this and, this happened to me. But I wasn't dealing with it. It's a completely different feeling when you're engulfed in that negative emotion, and then when you find the positive emotion and then can look back like, oh, okay, this is what I learned. Like you said, this is what I learned, and this is how I want to continue to live my life. And now I can use that to help other people. Mm-hmm. That baggage, that hurt, that pain, it's no longer of me. And that's why it's so easy for me to tell my story, because I've been there. Like, I've been through the trenches. Like, this is not to like throw out hoods, like, but I'm from Newark. Like, we go through it. Like, I'm from the gutter. I've been through, my father was a part of the mafia. Like, I've been through it. But where do we want to go after that? Do we want to continue to stay in that space, or do we want to step outside of that and live somewhere else that's so much lighter, so much more peaceful? It's so much more deserving. You are so much more deserving of something greater than what you endured.
Say that right there. Yeah, because it's in trauma, I feel like we, as much as pain and holding on to it doesn't serve us, we'll do it anyways. Right. And we'll identify with it, and when we're living in the mess, and when we're living in continued stress, poverty, whether that's, bad relationships, abusive relationships, whatever that may look like, that you're repeating, that, you're like, I've definitely been here before, and this is like my whole life is just nothing but drama and stress and mess. You think there's no way out, but to me, we have to start up here. And with mentally, like, to me, I look at it as like mental somersaults and backflips through, you're like bobbing and weaving all these thoughts that are hindering us directly from experiencing true freedom within, right, which allows us to go outside and be like, what? No, I am powerful. I am somebody.
Right.
I'm
right.
somebody. You want to know who I am, So I just love this so much. We do have a question. She's Taria Ashe, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. How do you not consistently blame yourself for what someone else did to you?
So I do not want you all to hate me for simplifying everything, right? But it's so simple. The first step for you to not consistently blame yourself is to ask yourself, who told you first that it was your fault? Go there. Start there. Because someone, when you were growing up, told you that you were the reason why something was not right. And it's not going to be until you find out who told you that and what that situation was. And once you work outside of that situation, then you'll be able to answer. Like, this is why you consistently blame yourself, is because you were taught and trained to blame yourself when something goes wrong. So
Mm.
that now shows up into adulthood. But somewhere in your adolescent stage, someone told you that you were the cause of some sort of failure, something negative. And that is what you hear every single time something goes wrong. You are the blame. You are the reason why this is happening. So to answer your question, how do you not consistently blame yourself? You have to go back to when you first felt like you were being blamed and work your way through. And once you work your way through that, girl, you ain't going to hear none of that. You're not going to allow it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But there are steps, but you got to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to the beginning and find out who that was. And it may not be, you may later find out, because your first recollection of getting in trouble or being told that you were the reason could be 11. But once you start tackling that 11-year-old self, that unhealed girl, you probably start remembering something that happened when you were 7 and something that happened when you was 5. So you have to go back. Who told you first that you was to blame?
Yeah, and that's so powerful. And it's one of the things that I learned in my own journey of understanding myself, which is you got to know your story.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know what thought manifested a truth for you that makes you operate in a way of not power. That's how I see it. I see like the situations happen and then I automatically, they take away a portion of my power. And there's turning pain into brokenness and there's turning pain into power. And power is obviously, like we keep mentioning, inner peace.
Right.
Peace. You know, when you feel it, you guys are going to feel it today after just like listening to this, because this is going to require, you can't unhear this. So you have to take these things, you know, and they're going to stick in your mind as to, you know, how can I work through this so that I can feel more free? Because I literally was on a sister circle session with another beautiful woman, and the woman was saying that she had not forgiven someone for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
20 years. And I know for a fact, when I look at people, you can either look like what you've been through or you can either not. Like there's no in between. Like the quality of your life will determine your skin and all of that. Obviously a whole bunch of other things, but energy is just so important, because when you release stuff, you know, you look lighter in being, you feel lighter. So it's just so powerful that we do this and that we look at each step. And that was a beautiful question, because all of us to a degree, a lot of us, we've been taught to blame ourselves, because I believe we're just a generation of being raised by parents that were on drugs, you know, like you talked about, like just in our communities, there's things that have been placed in our realm of experience where, yes, all of us to a degree have some sort of similarity on the things that we've endured as trauma. So it's so important to definitely, like you said, find the root of who taught you to believe that you have to blame yourself, because you don't grow from blaming yourself.
Right.
You don't grow, you don't become more mature. You're not able to look at that situation in a way that gives you empowerment. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, I'm like, dang, okay, I had to have been in a chaotic house with domestic violence and all that stuff and be the calmest person there, because now I help lead people through meditation that gives them a calm. But I could have never became this person. Right. And I'm very appreciative of the gifts that I have that I never knew I would manifest through letting go, through forgiveness, through, you know, even just not even knowing I was doing some of these things, but then to see your 8 steps. Though that's like when they say when you sell in a car, it's all inclusive, right? Yeah. You want to get everything. You get the camera to help you back up. You know what I'm saying? You want to get the lights on the side and start beeping when you're going over the line. You know what I'm saying? You're not driving on the line, you know, driving on the line. So to me, that's what the 8 steps of forgiveness is it saying, I want to operate in wholeness.
Right.
And in wholeness, I have to look at every possible thought that comes up when I refuse to forgive something.
Right. I know that we touched on the mental aspect, right? And we talked about emotion, and I know that you touched on the energy. But what also this book includes that I want to share with you is the scientific aspect of it all. When we are harboring feelings that are not conducive to our growth, it affects us on an epigenetic level, like scientifically, like it affects your DNA. So you know, maybe someone here, maybe not, you may come across having high blood pressure or diabetes or infertility, you know, obesity. These things show up on a scientific level. And if you don't work on yourself when you decide to have children, or if you decided to have children, just keep in mind that you've already restructured your DNA by not choosing to be so in line with your wholesomeness and your positive mind state that you can pass that on to your children. And that's not something that we want to do. I know that's not something that we want to do. So just keep in mind on all aspects, and I don't want to make this too much for you, but I do want to voice out on a scientific level. Epigenetics, you can research that when we get off. You can alter your DNA just by harboring these negative feelings and emotions.
Absolutely. And that's why these are so healing, because it's not, we're able to look at mind, body, soul. This is so deep. This is so deep. So I love that you just mentioned that. Crystal said, this has really been so affirmative for me. I've been struggling with letting go of a past situation. And it was these steps that I first heard from the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. That jump started in my process. The crazy thing is that I already knew I needed to do the work, but by not doing it, I did not have to confront those feelings that would accompany me on the journey.
Yes, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So as we kind of close this out, if we don't have any other questions, it is 1:11. Gary, did you have any questions?
No, actually, I just wanted to just applaud both of you for all the information that you shared with everyone who's participated in this event. It is valuable, insightful. I seen the chat messages. I heard, seen Keita wanted to shout, go on and shout your thing. And something that, you know, I know I talked earlier to you two about my capstone project and wanting to make it a bigger thing. But, you know I see the narrative out there all the time on social media that us men of color don't protect our women. And I just wanted to just throw out there, this is one of my many contributions and future contributions to protect our women and lead us toward a more holistic state of health as we move forward, because we can't move forward and become richer and everything else if our health isn't right. So I definitely thank you all for attending this event. And I thank you two, both Naisha, my new cousin, and for making this happen. I thank you so much, and I admire you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This, you know, I just learned today that y'all had the same name. All these time I've been tagging you guys, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Right, cousin. Oh my gosh, Gary, thank you so much. Honestly, you know, I think I want to thank you in times a million, because it's just beautiful when other people can see our work and see the work that we're doing, because I am a certified life coach. I teach based on experience of just listening to God and say, what will you want me to do on this earth? You know, I'm here. What are we doing? You know, and it's just an honor that you would approach it from that perspective and bring us here, and for Naisha to share her powerful, powerful, powerful stories. And it just shows that togetherness and unity are so big. And I don't know how many people are here in total, but this is just, you guys are like so smart for being here today. And so I just honor you for stepping into this space, because when you step into healing, let me just mirror what Naisha has been saying this whole time. Let's make it simple. Because even myself, I feel like I sometimes alluded to this big thing, like, oh my God, but let's just make it simple. Because once we even just think these thoughts, we're giving light to the possibilities of what can be. Even if you choose to go forward and hold on to things for the next 10 years, you know now you know better, right? And even Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. So I just want to honor you for even just bringing this workshop about and investing in me, you know, and that allowed me to invest in Naisha so that we could be here today, because this is my investment and my contribution to just what we're doing here on this earth and our ability to heal and live powerfully, which I feel like, Naisha, you are the pillar, and Gary, like, you're MVP right now.
Thank
the
you.
pillar of just what strength in our community looks like, and being able to help us work through our mental health and put that at the forefront. I just want to say thank both of you, like, just for everything and just this space that we've created here today.
Absolutely. So is there any way that they can reach either one of you on your social media handles? Throw those out there.
Absolutely. Yep. So they're right up here. So I'm on Facebook at Queens Recognize Queens, Instagram Queens Recognize Queens, QueensRecognizeQueens.com. Our beautiful Naisha is on Facebook at Naisha Williams. Serenity and Oasis. Please follow both of her pages. So if you guys are on your phone, I don't know if you can open up another screen and go follow her right now so you don't forget. She's also on Instagram at Naisha D, as well as Serenity_Oasis. You can also head over to her website, NaishaWilliams.com, SerenityOasis.agency. To either, you can, if you have a business and you want to book her for like your spiritual growth and your business growth, because they are all aligned, you could hit her up there. She also does therapy if you're interested in working with someone who can lead you through if you feel like you hit a brick wall when you're going through this process. I personally, I'm gonna admit right now, I even work with Naisha because we all have to work through our experiences so that we can thrive. And thriving is such an important word because it is possible. And I know we've been duped out to thinking it's possible. We don't think thriving is possible, and we live in survival mode. So you guys can hit her up there. You can also get the book at NaishaWilliams.com. It is on pre-order right now. And Naisha is also, if you guys want this, I want you to DM me. It's a private invite so far. She hasn't released it to the public, but she is doing a private 8 Steps to Forgiveness workshop where you will make an investment into the workshop and you, if you purchase the book. So definitely DM us so we can share that information for you with you as well. I encourage all of you to continue the work. I applaud all of you for being here today. You could have been anywhere in the world. It's a beautiful summer day and you guys are here. And in the times that we're in, to invest in yourself in this way, I just want you to know that you are powerful and this is a part of your power calling to you. I don't want to get all like spiritual, but y'all know I have to do it. This is a part of your spirit calling you to step into a higher depth of self. When you think deeper, you will experience a deeper portion of life, and all of us want that success. We want that peace. So like this is the beginning of of just beautiful journey. So someone also asked, where's the podcast? The podcast is Soul Chat. If you want the link to that, you can feel free to DM me, or if you go to Instagram, I have it at the link in my bio, as well as on Facebook. The link is in both of the bios, and it's available everywhere on Apple, Spotify, all those platforms. Naisha, which we did not mention because the season has not come back yet, but she also has a podcast called No Ops Podcast, which was started at a really powerful time where the community needed to have conversations with law enforcement, specifically Black and Brown law enforcement, which has been beautiful, and just giving them a voice to give their perspective. So I definitely highly encourage you guys to check that out. When you follow her on Instagram and or Facebook, you will definitely be able to find all of those links within her bios as well. So if we don't have any more questions, we're just going to close this out. Again, thank you everybody so very much for being here today. Do you guys have any other final words that you would like to say?
I love when queens link up and uplift other queens. That's it.
Yes. And kings, listen, Gary, you are the
I was gonna say I don't have my wig, but
I was gonna say, but it's the Black man for me.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's the Black man for me.
And I just, anybody watching this on the playback, because these playbacks will be available on YouTube. The other playback is on YouTube as well, correct? I can add that link into my bio so you guys have this training you can share with other people, because this is not something you keep to yourself. Like, this is something you be like, yo, grandma.
Right.
You got to watch this. You know what I'm saying? Because this is powerful. And when we operate in power, we just are able to see things so differently. But thank you again, Gary, so much. You are a real MVP. So we are definitely stronger together for sure. Again,
Absolutely.
thank you, Naisha, just so much for your time. Honestly, y'all, I'm telling you, the stars aligned to make this possible so that Naisha could be here. Because the first time I was gonna do it, I was gonna walk through the 8 steps, but I don't give it justice because it's her, that's her baby. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. Please go purchase the book. I look forward to seeing you guys in that second workshop. I don't know where we're going from here, Gary, but I support you forever. Anything you need, obviously.
Same here.
Yeah. There's more to come. I have more ideas cooking up for sure.
Okay.
So I'll definitely be in touch.
All right.
Thank
See you
you guys.
guys. Bye-bye.
Take it easy.